Right. Well, good morning again. Happy Friday. Everybody, we are here for the teacher evaluation training. Today we are dealing with part one, adult education educator evaluation plan. I have the great pleasure of introducing you today to our consultant for teacher evaluation. It is a new face for TEVAL. We used to have Jody Lambert, who was doing a lot of this work. But as Jody has phased out into more retirement schedule, Lisa Bowden, who is the Assistant Executive Director at EdAdvance, has taken over the role and has enormous amount of experience with this, just coming off of also doing a lot of teacher evaluation work with the State Department of Education. Lisa, I'll let you provide your full background and expertise, but I do want to just thank you for doing this and joining us and welcome you. And once you're all ready, we'll go ahead and get the presentation going, but you just let me know when you're ready for that piece of it. Okay?
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Amy. And thank you, everybody, for being here this morning on a Friday morning before the snowstorm. Because I'm sure there's a lot going on in whatever your buildings as you're doing today. As Amy said, am the Assistant Executive Director at EdAdvance. I've been here for almost 2 years. I came here from Region 1, which is in the northwest corner. It's those 7 towns in the northwest corner for those of you, 6 towns rather, I'm sorry, but 7 school districts. And I was superintendent of all of them and was in that region for 23 years as a social studies teacher, then as a K through 8 principal for the Salisbury Central School, and then as the assistant superintendent for curriculum instruction assessment, professional learning, and hiring of staffing, and then superintendent, which I took that job on July 1 of 2020 and had the good fortune of leading the district through the COVID pandemic. And then 2024, I came to EdAdvance. So as Amy said, I have had quite a bit of experience with teacher evaluation and support. It was one of my favorite activities as an administrator because it was really an opportunity to blend what was going on in the classroom to support students and teachers, but to work very closely with teachers to support their good practice. So this morning we have a presentation to go through to help keep us focused, but you're going to have a lot of opportunity to speak to each other, to speak to me, to ask questions. And I'd like to keep this as informal as possible. So as I go through the presentation, please pop up your questions in the chat or raise your hand, and we can address them as we go along because sometimes you forget at the end. And I want this time that we're together to be as meaningful as possible. So before we get started, if we just know who we've got here on the screen, if you could introduce yourselves and talk about what your day job is and how long you have been doing this work, and if you are an experienced evaluator or not. So I'm going to start. I'll help you start. Nazreen, I'm going to start with you.
Right. Good morning. So I'm Nasreen Alamari. I work for East Hartford Adult Education. I've worked for East Hartford for almost 10 years, but I've been program facilitator for the past, I don't know, 5 years. But this is my first year that they have put me full-time and added doing teacher evals because I had gotten my own 92. So this will be my first time
Congratulations.
doing teacher evals for East Hartford.
Great. Let's see, Sarah Lovelace.
Hi, good morning. So I'm Sarah Lovelace. I'm with We Race, Western Connecticut Regional Adult and Continuing Ed. I was the facilitator initially. I started about a year and a half ago, and was recently I took on the role of this past July of Assistant Director of Adult Basic and Secondary Ed. So I have a little bit of experience with the evals from last year, but excited to dive into this further right now.
Great. Great. Thank you. Lori Ouellette.
Hello, I am from Wallingford, and I have been in adult education since 1992. I've also been a social studies teacher, ESL teacher. I've been with Wallingford for 25 years, and my job just became full-time on October 6, 2025. And part of that, like Nasreen, is that I will now be doing teacher evaluations. So this is a completely different side of things for me because I'm used to being evaluated. And so I don't have experience in that, but I am looking forward to learning. I'm the
Fabulous. Thank
program
you.
facilitator. Sorry, I should have said my job title.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jean Copeland.
Hi, I am the program facilitator for East Haven Adult Ed. This is my 20th year with East Haven. My first 17 years were the CDP English teacher, and for the past 3, I've been program facilitator, and this will be my first go at teacher evaluations.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Mary Enright.
Hi, I'm the assistant director, interim assistant director in Stanford Public Schools for adult education. This is week 3 that I'm on the job, so I'm brand new to adult ed. I do have 30 years experience working K to 12 classrooms in New York City, Torrington, and Stanford. And I have a lot of teacher evaluation experience, not this teacher evaluation, but I'm on the dispute resolution committee for Stanford. So I've done quite a bit with teacher eval, but I'm told this is completely different. So
Great. It's yes, a little different, I think. Yeah, thank you.
you're welcome.
Ray.
Good morning, everyone. I'm the Ray Byron, Director of Ed Advanced Adult Ed. A little nervous because my bosses are all here. I've been here now for 1 year at Ed Advance as the director. I come from the comprehensive side where and I see many colleagues who I worked alongside as assistant principal at a high school and principal at a middle school. Always willing to learn more, and I know Lisa has a wealth of knowledge in this area, so I'm so happy to be here today.
Thank you. We're happy you're here. Oh, is that Omaris Journey?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Omaris Journée. Thank you, Lisa, for trying to pronounce that correctly. I really appreciate it. I have been in education for 22 years. 10 of those have been in administration. I actually got the pleasure and honor to work with Ray and Ralph in a district. We were a nice team together as assistant principals, and I've been in administration as a principal for 7 years, and this is my first year in Manchester adult education as the director of 3 particular programs, ABEG, D, and ESL. And this is my first year evaluating in adult education.
Great, thank you. And let's see, Ralph D'Amato.
Good morning, and good to see you, Maurice and Ray. They were both my bosses in a former life. Maurice was my boss when I was a director of school counseling, and I was Ray's assistant principal. And so I was 20 years as director of school counseling and 2 years as an assistant principal. And this is my second year at Middletown Adult Education as the director. So a little bit of time evaluating, but need to brush up on the nuances of adult ed process.
Fabulous, thank you. Meredith Tukey.
Hi, I'm Meredith Tukey. I'm the Director of Adult Ed for Killingly Public Schools. I started my career off as a school counselor for over 20 years, and then I became an assistant principal at a middle school, at Killingly Middle School for 3 years, then became the Director of Mental Health for Killingly Public Schools. And this year, this year, Killingly decided to open their own adult education program. So this is my first year as the adult ed director, in addition to the director of mental health. So I have some experience with teacher eval as an AP and as the director of mental health, but I'm always interested in learning more. So I'm looking forward to this.
Fabulous, thank you. Fernando Shiro.
Hello, my name is Ferdinando Shiro. I'm from Literacy Volunteers at Family Centers in Stamford, Connecticut. I've been in education for 10 years now and in this role for the last four. I have some experience in evaluating, but I was very interested in attending this session to kind of hone in some skills and see where I can improve, because if I improve, then my teacher evaluations will improve as well. And I could be more sharing and, kind of know a little more. So thank you for this opportunity.
Great. Thank you for being here. Okay, Jenny Ortiz.
Good morning. Nice to meet everyone. My name is Jenny Ortiz. I work in Danbury alongside Sarah for We Race. I'm the assistant director to multilingual learners and family literacy. This is my first time doing teacher evals. I've been in education for about 15 years in different capacities. So I'm looking forward to learning a little bit more.
Thank you.
You're
welcome. Justin Ziwasinski. Justin, are you there? Maybe he's on the phone or had to step away. We'll go along to Matthew Salvestrini.
Hi, everyone. I'm Matt Salvestrini. I'm the Director of Human Resources and Adult Continuing Ed down in Greenwich. I have 25 years experience with supervising and evaluating staff in my previous roles. But looking forward to hear this new perspective on how to approach supporting continuous learning in our teaching staff as well.
Okay, great. So I think I've got everybody. Variety of experience levels, backgrounds, and from different locations in the state. So we'll have an interesting discussion this morning. So Amy, if you want to go ahead and start the presentation. And again, I want to thank you all for being here this morning. And I will say that some of you have a great deal more experience in evaluating adults in this program. So if they want to jump in as color commentary on anything I have to say this morning, that is completely welcome. If we want to go ahead to the next slide and thank our providers of ATDN and digital ATDN, which is the Adult Training and Development Network that is provided to instructors, all educators in the state of Connecticut to provide opportunities and resources so that we are in a continuous improvement cycle around the services that we were offering to adults throughout the state. And that training is offered in a combination of both in-person and digital training. We have a couple of very simple learning targets for today. One is to offer you the opportunity to collaborate with one another so that you create a common understanding and consistency around the evaluator practice to support the growth of instructors. And the more that you're able to talk with each other in sessions like this and really develop a common understanding of what the expectations are for all educators in this system, provides that consistency and that equity throughout so that we know that all adults coming into these programs are being granted equal and fair access to the very excellent learning experiences that we're providing to them. And then also, of course, to align the evaluation process with the expectations of the college and career readiness standards that I think are just so well written for adult education. So next slide. And our goals are to understand the relationship between what this particular the adult ed piece is with the Connecticut system, general Connecticut system for evaluation and teacher development. For those of you who are in districts or have been in districts recently know that that has just undergone a significant amount of change, but some of the bones in the structure remain the same and similar, and we'll talk about that. We will take a deep dive as much as time allows to those standards for adult ed, and give you a chance to look at a lesson and look at a written lesson transcript and a video and talk about how that relates to the instruction of adult learners. Review, and Amy, I think, is dropping that in the chat for you because we will want you to have that handy as we go through the session. Review the rationale and design principles for the teacher evaluation plan, and the options for data collection as you're going through that process. Take a look at the rubrics, get you to try and use them, ask any questions about them, both for teachers and for service providers. And look at how those performance rubrics can help you to provide specific and guided feedback around instruction, classroom management, classroom environment, and then to review some forms that you might find useful in that process. So, next slide. So we all already talked a little bit about what you know. You gave a little bit of a summary of what your experience has been. Maybe this is a good time. I like to hear when I'm doing this with evaluators, what kinds of questions would you like to have answered today? But also for those of you who have experience, what have your challenges been and where might we be able to help support that? And for those of you who are first time in this, what are things that you're most concerned about coming into this? So you can drop in the chat, or if you would like to popcorn out and raise your hand, I can certainly call on you and see what you have to say. Lori.
I think for me, I also supervise the ESL staff and the NEDP staff in Wallingford. So a lot of them have come to me over the last few years when they have been evaluated. And I think for me, I would really like to be able to give them good, constructive, supportive feedback. And I would also like to keep the staff calm, because what I had heard in the past, and we have a wonderful director, but when Anthony first came in and started evaluating people, everybody assumed I'm exemplary on everything. And if they got proficient in something, they were devastated. And some of these are teachers who have taught ESL for maybe 40 years. They're very experienced. And, I just like to know how to best give them feedback and support and just keep them calm surrounding evaluations because everybody sort of freaks out. And they get very nervous and they take it very personally. So those are things that I'm looking to do a good job with when I'm evaluating them.
Okay, thank you. That is not an uncommon feeling, and we'll talk about that quite a bit. And the system kind of sets itself up for that by putting those labels on people, but we can certainly address how to minimize that. And perhaps people in this group have also dealt with that situation. So thank you for sharing that. Jean.
I was having difficulty unmuting. I have, like Lori, I'm responsible for evaluating NEDP, ESL, GED, CDP, basically everybody in my building. And most of them, I gave them the option of either the professional practice or the student growth option. And most of them chose the professional practice option. And so I'm a little, I guess I want to say a little unsure as to, how I could evaluate them and give them feedback with fidelity, given that it's such a subjective kind of thing.
Around their that review of practice?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, we can certainly talk about that. I have certainly experience with that, and I'm happy to talk about that. And again, the collective experience from our group, I think, can also be helpful.
Okay, thank you.
Let's see. I've got some things in the chat here. Um, challenges part-time staff. Ralph, can you say a little bit more about that?
For sure. I think I'm fortunate where I do have full-time staff in certain spots, and I think the the difference in buy-in and expectations of when a teacher comes to work, if they're only here for 3 hours a week and they're not getting paid much at all. We don't pay much on the part-time staff. We pay $37 an hour. And so I want to I want obviously them to be their best, but I also need to tread lightly because I want them to show up tomorrow.
Absolutely. And I think Amy and I talk about that quite a bit in terms of, you're trying to create an accountability system, yet you want to accommodate a variety. This is a very diverse workforce that you have in terms of their time, their length of time in the job, and then if they're part-time, how much time do they really have to devote? And you don't want to turn them off. So I think we do want to talk about that, and I would like to talk a little bit, get your feedback and input around how can we provide support systems, like is it a better curriculum or better materials if we were to look at data over time and where we want to fill in some of those gaps. How can we make it easier for the part-time staff so when you do give them feedback, it doesn't feel like such a heavy lift?
Yeah, I think that would be a good angle, like to look at data and just be like, we're here to support all the data versus that is not maybe not as personalized.
Yes, exactly. Okay, let's see. Who else do I have here? Mary, I'm brand new and need to know of basics such as about the platform for TVAL. You mean your basic where that data lives?
Yes, I'm week 3 on the job. I'm trying to figure out which platform is which, and do I even have the credentials? Kind of like a fish out of water here. I have a lot of experience, but not in adult ed.
Okay, so you don't even know where your where those evaluations will live once
No.
the reflections have been done and where how they're submitted?
No, that's why I'm here on this training. I'm hoping I'm going to learn it all.
We won't probably get into that quite so much today, but maybe Amy has some information about that. But we'll address that.
Yeah. Okay.
Let's see, Jean, Ralph says same issue. Part-time, okay, as an evaluator. I'm looking for techniques to foster candid and helpful reflection while reducing the fear, anxiety that evals sometimes spark. Okay, yes, and we will talk about that. And because I think anytime anybody's being evaluated about anything, whether it's preparing dinner for your family and waiting for feedback about that, up to more serious and accountable things like job performance, it's the way the feedback is delivered and the purpose and the intent of it. So, how is that really supporting? How do you do that in a caring and nurturing way? So we will spend some time talking about that as well. Any other questions before we move on? Okay. So everybody has to be evaluated annually by July. And you either have to use the state department developed plan, the adult educator evaluation and support plan, or your district plan that has an adult evaluation component to it. So just out of curiosity, and it's hard for me to see everybody on the screen, trying the best I can, but how many of you are using a district specific plan that is not the state plan? Okay, Nazreen, Lori, Ralph. Have you looked at the state plan and are they notably different? Do you know?
It's kind of why I jumped on this call to see a different perspective and then to see what would be better for the advancement of staff.
Okay, all right. So we'll go through that today, but if there's anything, any other things that are specific to your plan that you want to talk about, please be sure to mention that. I think all expectations should be the same, so hopefully we have a common consensus throughout the morning. The aspects that come from the state seed model, and as I said, that has changed some. This plan still does definitely draw from the educator guidelines for evaluation, in that there is an expectation that you will use different forms of data, that you are able to do different kinds of observations. There is an expectation that standards are aligned. So we'll see that there are many similar components to what evaluators are expected to do in the K through 12 system as well. The rubrics, however, for adult ed are different. You essentially you have two domains: the rubrics for the learning environment, and then the rubrics for learning engagement and commitment to learning instruction. And we will talk about and get you to think about and discuss a little bit about why that would make sense for adult ed, whereas there are four domains. There's a professional learning piece and a whole school development piece in the K through 12 evaluation that would be very hard to evaluate teachers, but there are some other considerations as to why these two domains make the most sense. It also recommends a similar menu of data to be used: formal observations, informal observations, review of practice, as I mentioned earlier. The performance levels are a little bit different now, but the intention is the same. While the rating system has been dropped from the latest teacher evaluation system, and they are really looking at, does the teacher meet the standard, meet the competency, or not meet the competency without those four ratings? Behind the scenes of getting to what that competency is, evaluators are still using the CCT to look at what the descriptors are for not proficient, developing, exemplary, proficient, and exemplary. So there are some nuanced differences, but the intention is that we really want teachers to hit that proficient standard, and then to it when they can, and seek to go beyond that. But again, working with adults in your program is going to look different than it looks in a K-12 system. And then there are, of course, differentiated performance rubrics for the regular education teachers, and for the student support specialists. So you want to move to the next slide. The differences are that this plan focuses only on the performance and practice component. It doesn't include student growth. So I think it was, I can't remember who that was at the beginning when we were talking about this earlier, who talked about the focus on student growth. We'll want to say a little bit more about that, because really it should be around the provision of instruction and creating a safe and engaging environment for students, where you really want that focus to be in terms of what you're looking at in your observations. As we said earlier, the second bullet is those two domains where the instruction is targeted, And it uses a holistic approach rather than the seeds for weighted components. And the seed has moved away from those weighted components as well. But the original seed, in that you're really looking at a preponderance of evidence. And all of this always needs to be done in an interactive, should be done anyway, in best practice, in an interactive dialogue with the instructor, so that what you are sure that what you're seeing and what you've been providing feedback on, that there is you're understanding the intention and the purpose from the teacher, and then providing feedback that where you have a preponderance of evidence that's really going to help the support and growth of that instructor. And you do have greater flexibility in the type and the number, whereas the current teacher evaluation program for K-12 is very prescribed in terms of years of service and numbers of observations. You really have to provide one throughout the course of the year, but more if you think necessary, and you can choose formal, informal, or review of practice, regardless of their number of years of experience and such. Next slide. So if you, Amy, can you drop the teacher evaluation plan in the chat? And if everybody can take a look at that. Have you had a chance to, those of you, those of you with lots of experience have probably looked at this plan, but those of you who are newer, have you had a chance to look through this plan? Okay. It is really clear and I think very well written to understand the expectations. And I think while it's very important for you to read this because I have it right here, it's a very good roadmap. It's really helpful if instructors can take a look at this plan as well, because there's language in it that talks about the fact that that the population being served are adult learners with differing needs, that the guiding principles are very reasonable and give you kind of a script for what it is that those of you who are talking about minimizing anxiety. You can take some of these, like Amy, maybe we could put the plan up on the screen.
Sure, bear with me one moment.
I have it here, so I can share my screen if that's easier.
No, that's fine. Just bear with me a moment and I will get it up for you.
And so I'm just going to quickly go through this for the newer folks and for the more experienced folks. If you can just, if you've looked at this, if you can just give us a minute. So if you want to scroll down,
you know where you want me to
yes,
stop?
to the next page. So here are the rationale that you can stop at the top there.
Okay.
At the top of the page 3.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah, so you can see the rationale provides you with, the basic philosophy of how this was created. But those guiding principles, if you scroll down a little bit more, Amy, that can start to formulate your script of how you talk with your educators, because these are all very reasonable expectations that you're looking for building instructors' skill and helping them be high quality instructors. And that is, again, if you emphasize that is a dynamic process between you as the person who's supervising them and them as the boots on the ground who are doing that day to day with the students and have the most information about the learners, and that evaluation process is an opportunity. And I will say the new state plan really emphasizes this, an opportunity to really dig deep into what the educator needs to do for those students and how you can provide them with support and feedback. And you're looking to strengthen individual and collective practices. So it's not just all about them, but you're seeing the landscape and looking at the data across the board and noticing patterns and trends. And when you're giving feedback, yes, it's targeted to that person, but you're also looking at a bigger picture of what needs to be done to satisfy the needs of learners across the board in your and that it's standards based. And the standards, I will say that the adult learner educators have to work with, I think, are much more practical and much simpler than what the K-12 standards are. And they have, I think they've been fairly well prioritized, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. And then there's that collaborative dialogue that I mentioned, performance levels. You talk about that continuum. And for most of your teachers, they are going to fall and probably in that proficient to exemplary range. And I understand that everybody wants an A+, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But, you really do need to make it clear that that's where most of your educators, all educators, are afraid that somehow they're going to end up in that developing, even though they've been an exemplary or proficient their whole life. That to let them know that as long as they are doing what they should be doing and the students are getting what they need, that your purpose is to provide them feedback to get better, and that there are rubrics. So they start to see that this is a very well thought out plan. And we'll just quickly scroll through the next things so people understand where things are. I won't spend as much time, but I love those guiding principles. The design principles, there's a system overview, talks about those two areas of evaluation, gives you some guidance around the evaluation process. How many, talks about teachers who teach multiple classes and multiple programs only have to be observed once. But that doesn't mean that when you're having that conversation about what you observed, you can bring into the conversation, how are these strengths and how are these opportunities for improvement overflowing into some of the other assignments that you're involved with. You can scroll down some more there. There gives you some guidance around data collection. And again, if you look at what's underlined there, evaluators may elect to use whichever model best suits their program and experience level of the instructor. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. Different observation methods are noted down there about 2/3 of the way through the page. And we're going to talk about the pluses and minuses of those. You can scroll down some more, Amy. The protocol, what the performance levels are, which we've talked about, training and calibration, and that's understanding the process, what we're doing now, goal setting. This session isn't set up to talk about that, but we'll do a little bit more of that in the second session. Talks about effective and ineffective instructors and gives you some direction about what you need to do to support both of those populations. And then how do you establish professional learning? And I know that there is an abundance of professional learning offered through the ATDN and digital ATDN, but how do you help instructors navigate that? And then if you just scroll down some more, Amy, then there are the rubrics, and you can just scroll through those because we'll spend some time on those for teachers and service providers. And then there is the observation evidence collection form, if that's something that will help you collect evidence, and we'll talk about that. Although we won't talk about these forms specifically, but you should know that they're there. And some guidelines to help you set goals. And then you can scroll down, and I think that's basically it. There's some resources which you can look at, and they can be useful to help supplement what you might like to know about the program. So I just thought it was important to walk through all those components. You can see it's not a very complicated document. It's written so that people who are busy and don't have a lot of time can get through it and find what you need and pretty efficiently. So next slide, please. Any questions so far? Can I just pause and please raise your hand if you have any questions? Or drop it in the chat. Okay. So let's get into down into the weeds a little bit. We talked about the fact that there's just these two areas, and I don't mean to minimize it by saying these two areas because they're very important, the learning environment and the instructional practice service delivery. So why do you think it makes sense, and you can raise your hand to jump in here, that these two areas rise to the top when it comes to effective learning for all students that are in our adult ed programs? What are some of your thoughts?
I think first and foremost, our students need to feel safe and comfortable and welcomed more than anything, especially right now, our ESL population.
Excellent. I mean, that safe environment, and that safety comes from a variety, it can be a variety of things, right? Certainly the environment that we're in right now can be very anxiety producing for people who are venturing into the ESL programs. But also what are people going to think about me, depending on where I am with my level of learning. So that notion of inclusivity around a number of categories. I'm an older person coming into this. Are people going to think that I'm too old to learn anything? So that ability to create that learning environment where you are creating the most inclusive and exciting classroom environment is extremely important. Anything else you might want to add to that classroom environment piece?
I'll jump in real quick because a couple things that I know coming from one side is where our students are mandated to come, right? And we have backing of like DCF and all these other support agencies that can work with families to support them. Here, right? Sometimes life gets in the way. You'll get a student who'll come in and then for example, when the SNAP benefits were discontinued for a little while, I had, teachers that were telling me like, they had to pick up more hours at work and they weren't able to come, but they wanted to be here. And I think our teachers, specifically, I've asked this year too, with a lot of these external kind of barriers coming into play, is send out text messages and emails through the WhatsApp app, where you communicate, just telling them how much you miss them and how much we would love them to come back. Maybe they don't necessarily come back in a week or two, but they come back next spring to continue on with that education. But those sometimes exterior barriers come into play, having to pick up extra hours, getting a new job, changes in scheduling at the job affects, and then you'll see your attendance kind of fluctuate, kind of like Gene was talking about with ESL. You see, these political, geopolitical issues coming, into play, where students won't come out and register or kind of draw back or want to take online classes because they are concerned, what may happen to them. But providing that, caring and loving rapport and environment in the classroom is important to keep our students coming.
Thank you, Ray. Yes, and so many levels of analysis there. Again, it's recognizing the challenges of the people coming in. And I know when I've been in, the few times I've been in to observe some of the classes of the adult ed learners, that many of them are coming in late and they may be anxious about needing to do that because of their job or whatever. They need to know that they're welcome to do that you want them to be there. But the flip side of that is that can be very frustrating to the instructor, right? And so you have to be sure that you're supporting that patience and flexibility and helping to support a teacher that's got maybe having a lot of that coming and going, and helping them as they're creating lessons to have the flexibility of having some out of class maybe access to those activities. As much as for adult learners, we know that collaboration and peer-to-peer interaction is important. We also have to have some individual access. So yes, those things are all very important. Any other ideas?
I'll just add one more as far as learning environment. I think cheerleading. I think
Yes,
our
me too.
students come in with this lack of confidence, and they are all brilliant and come with a variety of different skills that we need to kind of push and cheerlead them because
That
it's something that's missing.
absolutely, that excitement for learning. Like, we are so glad you're here, and you should be so glad you're here. And look at all the stuff we're going to do together, right? That is true, certainly in a K-12 environment, but I think in the environments that you're working in, that's really important. This is whether they're upskilling or trying to catch up with skills that they didn't develop somewhere along the line. They need to feel excitement about that, and they need to feel that their instructors are fueling that excitement. Thank you, because that was going to be the one I was going to add. Um, so, um, okay. How about instruction and practice and service delivery? I think there's not a lot to be said about that, but if somebody wants to punctuate that with why that would be important in terms of evaluation. Yes, Lori.
I'm not quite sure it fits here, but just something that I observed in our program was my director did speak to people about their instructional practices because I'm also the data person in Wallingford, and I did a demographic study for the teachers, and we learned that most of our students are millennials. So they're, roughly like, or maybe older Gen Z, they're 25 to 44. And what my director was noticing when he was evaluating people was that some of the instructional practices and the methods of delivering instruction were not necessarily engaging that age group. And some of the instruction may have been better for I'm Gen X, it was more similar to how I would have learned in school. And that was something that he did address through the evaluations. And I think it really helped for him to look at that and talk about most of your students are 30. How do they learn? And how can you change your practices or adapt your practices to help them?
Exactly. Yeah. So that's how are we being current and providing those who are in front of us. And the challenge, though, for your instructors is they may have a variety of generations in their classroom. And how do you structure a classroom with a variety of learning experiences too that are accessible to everyone? And we're going to talk about that as we go on here. So next slide, please, Amy. Um, so let's take a look at the rubrics. If you have the plan in front of you that Amy dropped in the chat, and you look at pages, the adult ed rubric for teachers starts on page 7. And Amy, can you just put that back up? I'm going to literally take 30 seconds to take a look at that, just to make sure people understand what the components are there.
Close your eyes. You wanted the rubrics. Okay.
Page 7. Here we go.
Yep.
So You can see that the rubrics are set up to be very user-friendly. At the top, you have that this is the domain for this one is the learning environment, student engagement, and commitment to learning. So again, what we just talked about, how do you create that learning environment that's safe, engaging, and inclusive? So the STEM that is common to everything in this rubric is that right at the top of the page, right below the title there. Teachers promote student engagement, independence, and interdependence in learning and facilitate a positive learning community by creating a positive learning environment that is responsible to and respectful of learning needs of all students. So every indicator, that's what they're referring to when they talk about the STEM. The column down the side are all of the indicators that you would look at that would provide you with opportunities for feedback to an educator around the topics that relate to that STEM. And then all of the columns as they are labeled give you the descriptors of the levels of performance for each one of those indicators. And if you hop down to, I think it's page 9, Amy, you see the same thing is true for the rubric for service providers. And so you've got the learning environment, and then the instructional practices are the next part of the rubric on both rubrics. So we're going to spend some time now. Do you all have access? You can all see those on your screens in front of you. Or you have a printed copy. So Amy, if we go back to the presentation, what I would like you to do is we're going to start with the teacher evaluation rubric. And I'd like you to take a read through that. And I would like you to highlight keywords or phrases that would be guidance for you around the quality of performance in proficiency that looks at differences in quality in each of the performance levels. So would help you differentiate what's exemplary, what's developing, what's not, which is below standard, and then identifies the target element or behavior for each of the indicators. So I'm going to give you, and you're going to do the same thing for the service delivery model. So I'm going to give you, let's say about 7 minutes to do that. And as you're finished, if you could just raise your hand on your screen so that I know everybody's had an opportunity to look at that. And you can see that the things that you're looking for are up on the screen there, and they are the same for both rubrics.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? We're looking at page 9 only, or we're looking at all of them?
You're looking at both rubrics. So the teacher rubric on pages 7 and 8, and the service delivery rubrics on pages 9 and 10.
Okay, thank you.
And just, randomly look for those things that jump out to you. I have a few seconds left. Does anybody need more time? Okay. Amy, if you could move to the slide 15. No, yeah, great. So as you looked at those two rubrics, we're going to talk compare and contrast a little because the way they look for the teacher, they do look different for your service providers. And just to be clear, that's going to be your counselors, your national education diploma program advisors and assessors, or your program facilitators. Those of you who are program facilitators, this would be the rubric that would be used in your evaluation. So where do you see that those indicators are the same for those two populations, and why does that make sense? Just take a few minutes and look through them.
So I think that first page for each is the same because that is building the relationship between the teacher and the student or the counselor and the student. That's building the trust, that's building the respect, that's building that relationship.
Thank you, Nasreen. That's absolutely very true. And that's going to be so foundational to your success, right? So both the educator needs to have that rapport and relationship with the students, but then of course, so do the counselors and the support staff that are supporting the teachers. Any other comments?
I saw the word and the phrase that had to do with consistency throughout on both. And you know, whatever positive behaviors or positive environments, you have to be consistent with it. And you know, I know that especially in a younger adult ed population, that consistency really helps with the learning environment and their overall success.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jean. And as an evaluator, how does that help you provide some coaching support, knowing that those two, how could that help you with providing some coaching support, knowing that those two pages are very similar with their expectations? Any thoughts? So when you're providing some goal setting or some feedback, making sure that there's collaboration between those two groups, right? And helping them understand that, yes, you are all in it to win it. And the language is set up to be as consistent and consistent as possible across the rubrics. So it gives you an opportunity as a coach to instructors to say this, you know, help them find ways to work together where that needs to happen around some common goals. Okay, so, and where is it appropriate and necessary for the indicators to be different for the two groups? Kind of answers itself, but we can talk about it for a minute.
Excuse me. I kind of had a question. I don't know if it's
Yes.
So when I was looking at the rubric in the section that says focus on feedback, it consistently says, you know, the teacher may be encouraged to record or document strategies. Like that was consistent on all of them. Am I the only one that has a little concern with that, especially in this environment? Like, I don't know that students would
Can
want
you
to be
talk about
recorded.
that a little bit about your concern, Mary?
You know, if you're recording students, I know that used to be a requirement in New York that you had to make videos and things, but in the K to 12 environment, you had to get releases and everything. These are all adults. I know it's very different, but I wouldn't want someone recording in the classroom, without, I guess, full consent of all in the room. But even so, even if they had consent, I would caution against that, is just my comment. I wanted to know if anyone else feels the same. Kind of surprised me to see that there.
Any thoughts about that? I think it's very valid, Mary, but any other thoughts or additions to that? I think it's important to read the language. The language does say may. It certainly doesn't make it a requirement. And I think that you do need to take the needs of every student into consideration. Where it's going to put somebody at risk, of course, you would not want to do that. But where that it can be a helpful tool, I think you are empowered to go ahead with that practice. But I do think you raise a very important point around being sensitive to, and I would be surprised if the students themselves wouldn't also raise that red flag. I know we've had that experience in other situations with students not, wanting to fly below the radar as much as possible.
If I could jump in too, because I just recently went through the team process again. And I think what this is also talking to is providing the opportunity for one instructor to go in and watch a model lesson from a peer and or watch videos that may be available that are considered exemplars or proficient, where that instructor has already asked for the ability to videotape in classes. Having sat through this, you're watching an instructor and she's discussing, a particular, topic in class and student participation. I think sometimes that's what that's talking about as well. Being able to say, hey, you know what? I just saw Omaris provide this great example in a CDP or ESL class. You should go in and watch that, like we would do, to any teacher. This is what they're doing, and that's exemplar. Not necessarily saying to the teacher, "Hey, you have to videotape yourself, and then let's see it." Just because I've just recently gone through the team process again, because it's been a while, and I think that's kind of what it's talking about, is providing those models for teachers or other teachers that could utilize those type of things.
Thank you, Ray. And there are ways now, certainly with phones and with artificial intelligence, for learners to do recording of themselves on their own devices. So it's not being shared with anybody else. And if you're giving them a mentor video, as Ray suggested, that could be a model that they can use their video in your presence with that mentor video to compare and contrast. If you've got a language, pattern use or some language practice that you want to do, or you can even have the person making the presentation to their phone, and your phone can give them feedback using an AI tool. So there are lots of different ways to get around that, but of course we would not want the students to put themselves in a position where they would be especially vulnerable. So just to be sure we're clear that the indicators are different in the two groups are around the instructional delivery and the resources and groupings for the teachers, because they are primarily concerned with the instructional delivery, and the service providers are going to be thinking about the provision of their service delivery and adjustments that they need to make along the way, depending on what students need. And of course, they have got the maintenance of records, which is important for different aspects of their position. So any other questions or thoughts about that? Okay, Amy, I think we can move to the next slide. So this is a evidence and context. This is meant to be a broad general. As an observer, when you are thinking about the overall aspect of what you're seeing in the classroom, what would evidence look like in your context? The interaction between teacher and students in terms of behavior, voices, and actions. So what are the broad, general things that you would be looking for to see that the teachers are meeting the needs, or the service providers are meeting the needs of adult learners? This could be a little bit of a difficult question. So think about if you're flying the plane at 60,000 feet, what are you noticing about the teacher's behavior, the voices in the classroom, and any activities that are taking place?
I don't mind sharing.
Sure.
I think that a lot of it depends on, is the teacher doing most of the talking? Are the students doing most of the talking? Do you hear more, again, in terms of voices, right? Like what is the teacher doing versus the students doing? Is the teacher providing the entire time explicit instruction, direct explicit instruction, or are the students taking ownership of their learning? What does that engagement look like, right? Is it, again, the teacher doing most of the talking, or are students working collaboratively in groups and sharing their learning? Is there ownership of their learning? And is there hands-on learning, right? Or project-based learning? So those are a lot of the things that we would want to look for in terms of, is the teacher doing most of the teaching and owning the teaching, or are the students owning the teaching, or I should say the learning? And does it look like more like a facilitator up there or coach versus quote unquote like a director?
Right. And I think it's important to lay those expectations out in the beginning as you're working with your staff in terms of meeting the needs of adult learners, what your expectations are in a very positive way, and to understand the spectrum of educators that you may have in front of you. You may have some very veteran, very more traditional teachers to say, these are the sort of kinds of things we're expecting, that there's as much coming from the students, if not more, in terms of the behavior and engagement in the task and all of that. And we're going to help you support that over time, that all voices are valued and heard in the classroom, and that the activities are project-based or, simulations, role-playing, that there is a lot of student engagement that is involving all students. So thank you for sharing. Anything else that anybody would like to add? Okay, so let's move into the standards on the next slide. So we have some general expectations, and then we have some very specific standards. And Amy, if you can drop that link in the chat, and if you can all pull that document up, we're going to take a look at following along in that manual for the next several slides. So I'll give you all a minute to pull that up. Anybody need more time? Okay. So, okay, yes, Nasreen, you would use the ESL standards, and sorry, I'm not prepared to speak to those this morning, but those would be the standards that you would use. Although, I wonder if there isn't some crossover with some of the content-specific standards, and so you would want to be sure that you're paying attention to that. And what I will say is that this is where I think it was Ralph's question, and several others of you had the part-time sensitivity. Because you want to be sure that what teachers are doing are standards aligned, and this can be some of the most time-consuming and difficult or challenging activities that teachers engage in terms of planning for their lessons. Because unless you have programs that are aligned or a curriculum that is fully developed down to scope and sequence, where there are lessons that are aligned with these standards, this is difficult. This can be time consuming and difficult for teachers. So to the extent that you can help minimize anxiety around evaluation and have them know, especially for your newer teachers, that this is an evolving process over time, and work with them on what are the constructs of really good lesson planning, and have them pay attention to the priorities that are noted in the shifts that we're going to talk about, and what the priority standards are that jump out at them as they look at those shifts, and how are they designing work that's going to meet those. And we'll say a little bit more about that in a few minutes. So if you want to go to the next slide, Amy. This is an important slide. Not that they all aren't, but what context in the area of English language arts is most relevant to preparing adult students for success in higher education and training programs? Same for math. And which standards in each content area are important for adult students? So if you look at in the standards on pages 22 to 28, you are presented with the standards for both ELA, and then subsequently we'll talk about the standards for math. But prior to that page, on page 9 for ELA, you see the key shifts in the standards. I think you can direct teachers to the shift complexity, the shift 1, shift 2, and shift 3. So complexity, evidence, and knowledge. And basically what you're being told based on research in this document is that you want adult learners to get to accelerate their reading ability to be able to handle complex levels of text, because in a work environment, that's probably what they're going to need to address. And then how do they produce, how do you know that they are really comprehending what they are reading? How do they produce evidence from their reading, from their writing, that their speaking ability is able to cite text, to make a rational argument? And then knowledge, that they should have cross-curricular, cross-disciplinary understanding. And if teachers even just start to take bites of those standards, new ones, and this is a way you can work with them in coaching, and looking at plugging in the standards that meet those shifts, because those are the shifts that are going to have the highest impact on adult learners. And if each year they take on a couple of those standards, addressing them in their lessons and practices that align with those standards, over time, they're going to build up their ability to incorporate standards as they are needed and as they are prioritized. Because if you look then, if we go into the standards for English language arts, for example, on pages, they start on page 13. You can see that those standards are broken into 5 levels of learning. And you may have students who fall into each one of those buckets. And how are you going to plan for them and what are the standards that may be common to all of them, and where can you accelerate learning for some of them to address those standards in a different way. So you have to help teachers in some cases, I think, break that down. And the same thing will be true for the math standards. And the math standards, I think, are even more, they're more dense, and I think they can appear to be more intimidating to teachers. And so really helping them. And to the extent that you have archives of lessons that have worked well, and start to build that compendium so that you might be able to have a library of lessons that new teachers have access to, or if you notice that teachers are, even your veteran teachers are using lessons that don't work so well, if you have exemplars that are working around those standards, is something that you are tools that you can use to help lighten that load. So if you want to take just a minute and take a look through, how many of you have had time to have a look at this document and look at the standards? Some of you. Okay, so take a few minutes and just have a look at how this, again, the reading is great, gives you the research behind it, how it compares to K-12 standards, and what your priority, what the priorities are with respect to learning. And for you all, give yourselves a break. You need to, learn these over time, and and start to, when you're observing, understand as you've looked through this document, how you might be looking at some of those standards coming to life. And that will become apparent to you through interactive dialogue with your teachers, thinking about how they address their standards, having those standards-based conversations with them. And then as you unpack over time, you get to know these. Like when I came to be a K-8 principal after I taught social studies in high school for 10 years. And when they hired me, I said, I am never going to be able to give feedback to these elementary school teachers. They teach everything all the time, and I know social studies. I will say curriculum is my jam, so I got to know it. But after time, I got to know, if I walked into a 5th grade classroom, social studies, I'm not really sure that these standards are being addressed in quite the way they need to be, but it was over time and with enough experience as an observer. So you're going to have to give yourselves a break too, to get to know these standards over time. And you come back and look at them from time to time. And again, I think they're written in such a way that they are, especially the English language arts standards, that they are digestible. And I would say anything that we can do to help crosswalk, prioritize these, to make these easier for you to use, that's expertise we have in-house here, and we can certainly do that. So in the interest of time, I'm going to move us ahead a little bit. Amy, if we can go, you get a sense of what those standards look like. Amy, if we can go to the next slide. So you can see for the ELA standards, we have the reading standards that are on pages 22 to 28. You can have a look at those. They ask for you to for teachers to be working with students across genre, that there should be culturally sensitive approach to the learning, and over time. And that the most important thing is that you're scaffolding students to be able to accelerate their levels of complexity, because when they go into the workplace, they are going to be expected to be able to read, make sense of, and provide information about how they're using materials that they're expected to be familiar with. We're not going to spend time going through these now because we don't have time, but next slide, please. Then there are the writing standards, and those are about structures and formats of writing. And you can see that there is writing, they're the general sort of structure of writing. You don't have time really with these people, and they're coming in. Remember, adult learners are coming in with a lot of meta, a lot of prior knowledge. Sometimes it's not in English, but in their native language. And so a lot of those structures are going to be similar across languages. So you're looking at understanding where they are, helping them to elevate their writing craft, but really making sure that they can write across disciplines too. So history, social studies, STEM, and information, narrative, all of those different kinds of writing. Next slide, please. Speaking and listening, this is very important, especially in our work environments have become so fast-paced, and the expectation is that you should be able to say what you think, provide evidence for what you think about. So there should be opportunities in your classroom, in the teachers' classrooms, to be able to work together. This is where collaboration is really important for them to practice based on the text or the activity that you're giving them, to integrate that information, to provide oral presentation, to use different kinds of media sources, and to be able to express themselves. So I can't remember, I don't know if it was Jean or Mary who had said it a few slides back, who's doing the talking is going to be something that's very important. Next slide, please. And how you scaffold their language ability. And these are the rules of writing and their craft of writing. Again, this is where contemporary use of mentor texts. So when you select a text that is at a good level of complexity, but also gets at a style of writing that will be useful to the students. So you're not just looking at, oh, this could be a level of complexity that would make sense for this population, but it's about, I don't know, some obscure topic in history. We're going to look at a lesson in a minute about the Gulf of Tonkin. I mean, how really useful is that? And what is the voice that document's being, that is used in that document? And how can that document be used as a way for them to look at the document and emulate the style of that document in their writing? So, that's some professional development that your teachers can take a look at as well. Next slide, please. And then you're not deliberately and expressly trying to teach all the rules of grammar, which you will not have time to do. So here's some good observation tools. And Amy, will we be able to share? I think this slide would be really good to share with this group after this session, because you want to you can make this as a checklist and make your notes around that the curriculum content of the lesson matches the demands of the standards. And that doesn't have to all be on you. That can be part of your dialogue with the teacher when they come in and they talk about the standards they used and why they chose the curriculum content in that lesson. You can talk about whether there was alignment there or not. And they may be looking for some good feedback around that. That the learning activities, questions and tests are text specific, and that they are demanding, that they're making them think, raise their level of thought, that they're synthesizing, that they're analyzing, they're not just memorizing. That the standards are translated into engaging lessons for the students, and that it's intentionally sequenced to build skills over time and knowledge over time, and that they're understanding, there are check-ins over time to make sure that people are understanding, and how do you know, and that the instruction to adjustment is taking place as need be. So this is a very simple, very good checklist for the ELA classroom. And it is good for math too, but there's some other tools that you might use. We'll get to that in a minute. Any questions or thought about that? And these go more deeply into each one of those core elements. I think we can move along, Amy. I'm a little worried about time. So here are those core elements. You can see each one. So this one is pretty clear. We've talked about this. What are the goals of the lesson? What do students need to know to be able to do? Is there a mix of the core skills expected from ELA? Why, what text? Why is that text chosen? Is there a sequence of texts which really does help students when there's continuity to their learning and they're building knowledge? When I talk to teachers in schools, there's a woman named Karen Hess who has written a book called Rigor by Design, Not Accident, and Chance rather. And she talks a lot about the need to build schema. And the stronger your foundation is when you're building knowledge that builds on prior knowledge, that builds on knowledge, and that progression, you're building that schema that allows students to continually synthesize, apply, and create their own thinking about things. And the complexity of the text, of course, is important, and that can be challenging in a room full of diverse learners. But again, that's where you can provide that coaching support. And I haven't mentioned this before, but, and Amy, it might be interesting to do some additional professional learning about this, but there are all kinds of AI tools that you can use to help you to help teachers make more deliberate and specific choices rather than spending hours trying to find text if they don't have programs that are providing that for them. And then what are the quantitative and qualitative features of the text so that you can measure their understanding? So what are those rules? What are the key concepts you want them to understand? What is it about the voice? What is it about the tone, those elements and style of writing? So the next slide, please. So for the learning activities in Action 2, this is all about engagement. So again, who's doing the talking? Are they facilitating them such that they're engaged in what they're reading? Do they require them to use evidence from the text? Are they making inferences, which is a very important skill that we find in K-12 learners are not really good at that until they get to high school. They really struggle with inferences. And so adults who are challenged in reading or that are coming to it from a second, they may be making inferences in their own language, but making inferences in English may be more difficult. Is there a practical focus on vocabulary, and is that being incorporated into the lessons? And is there enough wait time in the process for them to think? And a way to have that done is to have them think independently, to pair with another learner, and then to be able to share. And that sometimes breaks down that learner anxiety. And so are you seeing that in the classroom? Core Action 3, Amy, we can go to. Standards are translated into lesson content that productively engages all learners. Is everybody actively participating in the lesson? Why or why not? Those strategies, those adult learner strategies. So we've talked about those. Some project-based learning, if you have, and that doesn't have to be a huge project. You can do that small, small bite-sized projects. And again, there are resources that can be provided for that. Are they doing, can you try a Socratic seminar? Can a teacher try a Socratic seminar where they are given a prompt from something they've read and the expectation is they're sitting in a circle and everybody's going to have something to say about it? you have to develop those norms and practices, but that's a way to engage all people in a discussion. Hands-on simulation, role playing, are you seeing all of those things that really engage learners, and especially adult learners who are able to bring all of that knowledge that they're bringing into the classroom with them and apply it? And some of this is pretty self-evident. What considerations are made so that students can access the meaning and learn from the text? So again, it's really deconstructing that standard into discrete activities that are going to help the learners learn. Core action 4. We talked about this sequence to build on the student's skills and knowledge. You have multiple levels of learners. Are you addressing all those levels? Does it provide them with the opportunity to make connections among the domains of the reading, writing, speaking, learning in the discipline? Do they see connections between, like, if I am a good reader, I'm going to be a better writer. I'm going to be a better speaker. So really helping them understand, and there's a lot of brain research there to help support why all of those things happen, but it's how we process information and how all of those disciplines are really related. And the connections made between the lesson and you're setting them up for their future learning. Core action 5. Oh, the math standards. Sorry. Math standards. Again, you can go to the next slide, Amy. They are accepted in their entirety. So we're looking at all of the math standards here, which is it's a lot. But you're really looking at, well, before we get into the standards themselves, there are these 8 mathematical practices. If you have, and I know you have, your teachers have a hard time having anything permanent be situated in their classroom, but if there is ever a need for an anchor chart, I would have this be an anchor chart that you could take up and put down in your classroom, because these practices give your teacher a good script for the questions that they are asking of students as they are applying their math learning. So can a student make sense of problems and persevere? And persevere doesn't mean doing the same thing over and over again, but if I don't understand, what else do I have to do to ask another question, go back and look at the resources you provided for them, so you're developing that independence in problem solving. That's what the teacher would be doing. That they need to be helped and given feedback about their reasoning, that this is an abstract concept. It lives in this conceptual realm, and quantitatively what they are doing with their ability to manipulate algorithms and order of operations, that they can construct arguments. I mean, we are very math phobic in the United States, and so helping learners to construct those viable arguments, or those reasonable logical arguments that are grounded in mathematical thinking, and critique the reasoning of others in a logical way, that they can model situations with mathematics using the appropriate tools at the appropriate time, attending to the precision of their work, looking for and making the use of the structure that the teachers have taught them to solve problems, and look for and express regularity and repeated reasoning. So you can see that knowledge has been embedded and has become part of their schema. This is a great, if you can teach these, if your teachers have time to teach these practices and can use these as prompts when they're asking students or groups of students to unpack their work, these are great. Next slide. And then these standards can be applied across all of the levels, A through E, You don't need every mathematical practice in every circumstance. And it's important for students to understand that and understand why they're attending to that practice when they are, and that they need to experience all of those practices throughout their course of study. Next slide, please. And then these are the domains for the K through 8 levels, and you can see that they're really mathematics, right? Numbers and operations, the number system, functions, geometry, measurement and data, statistics and probability. And next slide. They scale up the domains for high school, start to get into algebraic thinking. The function piece here is graphing, really, functions, geometry, and getting into more detail around statistics and probability. And so you'll want to look at the math standards and see how they sprinkle themselves throughout those levels A through E. Next slide, please, Amy. And so this says basic questions evaluators should be able to answer, but the instructor should be able to answer these questions as well. They should be able to come in and explain to you why they designed the lessons the way they did. And that doesn't need to be, again, when I say what the instructor should be able to do, this is part of that interactive dialogue where you're being very supportive, you're understanding what they want to do, and you're providing them coaching and feedback around the alignment with the standards, and how can instructional practices be improved to promote higher and deeper levels of student learning. And this is where that there is maybe some more direct basic instruction around some of the math concepts, but letting students work with each other in terms of doing the work, showing how they do the work, getting feedback from each other, and then applying that work in real world situations is very important in the study of math for adult learners. And this is where your teachers may need a lot of professional development support, depending on what level of math they are teaching when they come into your staff, because they are going to have to maybe teach at levels that have been above their certification, and may need some help with that. Next slide, please. So that is the conversation about the standards. I went through it very quickly. Again, I'm sorry, because of time, but does anybody have any comments or questions or concerns, or is it completely overwhelming? This would be a good time to share that. Okay. So, you will need to spend a little more time with those, and the more familiar you are with them, I think the more comfortable you'll feel as coaches. So we do have an activity here, but I'm worried about the time. Amy, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. Maybe if you want to have them take a look at it after the training, and then we can touch base at part 2 if you'd like to.
I was going to
just
say,
move on.
I might save the 2 activities for part 2 and give you time to do those. And then that's how we'll start the part 2 training.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
So I would review the transcript, go ahead and review the transcript between now and the next time we meet, and take the rubric and align what you have seen. This is a teacher that's teaching a lesson around the Gulf of Tonkin incident, but the topic is sourcing for the Gulf of Tonkin incident. And so you want to identify evidence that aligns with the attributes of the rubric and then become prepared to be able to discuss your thoughts based on the fact that you're only looking at the evaluator's notes from the lesson. So see what conclusions you can draw from that. Okay. And if you have any questions about that, in my emails at the end of this, you can certainly direct those to me. Next slide. Evidence collection, I'm going to just turn this over to you, to those of you who are more experienced evaluators. There's scripting where you're trying to write down everything that the teacher says from the time you walk in till the time you leave. Some people are very good at that. I was not, because I was always trying to look at everything going on in the classroom. I much preferred note-taking, words spoken by teachers, asking students how they were doing in the lesson. What actions are you observing in terms of activities? What does the classroom look like? Is it inviting? Is it conducive to students being able to work together? That is also what mapping does, where you're mapping out what the classroom looks like. And you can do engagement tallies. How many times did each student speak? So does anybody want to share what strategies have been particularly helpful to you in doing a classroom observation that might be helpful for those more experienced evaluators? This is where your experience would be really helpful to our less experienced evaluators.
I would say pre-meeting with the teacher just to take the edge off them.
I'm sorry, Ralph, I'm having a hard time hearing you.
Oh, sorry. Pre-meeting with the teacher. So I think there was some conversation earlier on about like not wanting to be like the aha moment or not wanting to cause more anxiety for the teacher. And so I think if you be with them previously and kind of set them up for success, and so even if they put the dog and pony show on for that one time you're there, it sets the expectation, and then they can learn. If it feels good for them, they can learn from it.
Great. Yes. And to the extent that you have the time to do a pre-meeting, you also get to do some co-construction with them, right? And do look at some of those elements that we just talked about and make sure that those are present. Those ingredients are present in the experience that you're going to be seeing. Anything else anybody would like to say about evidence collection? Mary, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I think you're one of the most experienced evaluators here, right? And Matt, is Matt still here?
I said I had a lot of experience with teacher evaluation, not necessarily evaluating. I was recently a teacher.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
I have evaluated before, but not quite recently.
Okay. All right. Well, I think you find what's comfortable for you. And again, I'm happy to help talk about that. If anybody wants to make an appointment with me and talk about, try it, come back to me, talk about it. I'm happy to help you. Do it all the time. Next slide, please. So this is fairly self-explanatory. And this gets to Ralph, your concern about again, minimizing the anxiety. And those of you who talked about this, and somebody talked about everybody, I think Lori may be talking about everybody wanting to be exemplary, and it freaks people out when they're not. That you really have to help them understand that exemplary practices are those that really accelerate student learning, where you're seeing a lot of growth over time of students learning. Proficient practices increase student learning. So you're getting closer to that, what that standard of expectation is, but you maybe don't see that rapid acceleration of student growth. And I know you're not measuring student growth, but when you're having those conversations, to the extent that teachers can provide evidence, and I think it was Ralph where we talked about, depersonalize this to the extent that you can say, look, this is really to help you and your practice. So to the extent that the conversations we can have can be about data and information, that you can bring examples of student work, and that's where you have to decide for your part-time people. Maybe a review of practice would be better than a classroom observation. And what they're bringing to their review of practice is their lesson plan, a description of how they think the lesson went, but then evidence of the outcomes. And have a dialogue about what you're seeing and listen to what they're saying and providing them feedback around that. Developing practices that are those that just flatline, they may be taking in something, but you're not really seeing much learning growth. And below standards are those that are detrimental to student learning. And so you're also going to have to look at the kinds of evidence that helping teachers understand the kinds of evidence that they bring to an observation, a conversation about their observation or their review of practice that's not overwhelming or intimidating to them as well. That can be a nugget that you can really sort of dig into around practice improvement. Next slide. You've got to use this evidence. There's no weighted formula, but you have to use the evidence of what you've seen in the classroom, what you've learned from the teacher, either through a post-observation conversation or in a review of practice, and you make the judgment about what the holistic rating would be for that teacher. And you may show them where there are parts of their practice where they are truly exemplary and they should be continue to do that work. But here's where you're proficient, and the preponderance of evidence is kind of that I saw in that lesson. And so they may ask you to come back and see something else to the extent that you have the time and that's what your program allows for. You may find that you need to go back and see them on a couple of occasions. Next slide, please. We're almost finished. These two things are forms to help you match the evidence to rubrics for teachers. Have a look at those between now and the next session, and we can talk about those as to whether or not they were useful for you. Gives you a way of rating they've done. Now, this is a sample video. This is the video I'd like you to watch between now and the next session, and just make your notes, take a look at the rubric, and we'll talk about how do you think you would give that particular teacher some feedback? What did you think the strengths were? Where were the opportunities for improvement? And how would you set up your feedback using evidence? Okay, next slide, Amy. So I think Mary, this gets to your question about platforms. There's no requirement that a specific platform is being used. So I think you've got to look at what past practice has been. And is that the expectation of whatever the platform that was used in the past, that you continue to do that? But if there's nothing in place, you can set up whatever kind of archival system you need to, provided whoever the higher power is that you work with is on board with that. Okay, is that helpful?
Yeah, I certainly bring these to my director.
Okay. so that this plan is one component of the program compliance and quality review. That's part of what you need to do. And so you really should, the components that you should be collecting and archiving should be the goal setting, the data collection that you used around observation or review of practice, the rating, and any appropriate artifacts that you feel, or it may be that your district requires you to save as part of that evaluation process. Next slide, please, Amy. The rubrics are here. Again, we've taken a look at those. They're embedded in the plan, but they're there and easily accessible. And the next slide. So I hope what you're going away with today is that this is going to work for all of you, what we talked about, that we've developed some commonality around what is good practice in observation and evaluation of your staff, that we've looked at the indicators as they relate to the teaching and service delivery, and we've done some conversation around alignment of the standards, that there are different kinds of data collection that you can, strategies that you can use, and the difference with the feed model, the differences between what the K-12 model looks like. Next slide, Amy. But really what I hope is that, our time is really very short, and I could talk about this all day long because there's so much involved in this, but we will have another 2 sessions together. And if you would like to talk to me in between, we can exchange emails. You can organize a Zoom meeting with me. I'm happy to be helpful and supportive to you as best I can. But I do hope that what we did today was helpful. I thank you all for spending your time and for listening to me yammer on for a while. And I really look forward to seeing you in the next session. Amy, is there anything you want to add?